You are tampering with forces you can't understand. We have major corporations sponsoring this event.
The Purple Rain Fantasy Show is a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network that includes Jim Day of FF Champs, Bob Lung of Big Guy Fantasy Sports and creator of the Consistency Magazine, Anthony Servino of FF Face Off and Gridiron Experts, Adam Ronis, Dr. Roto of SiriusXM, and many more great people and podcasts, so be sure to check them all out at fulltimefantasy.com. If you haven't checked out the Full-Time Fantasy site yet, you can sign up for free. Check out all the contests available, including Beat the Expert Leagues. They've got $35 starter leagues, free mock draft world championship, best ball championships, online championship leagues, dynasty world championship, and the granddaddy of them all, the Fantasy Football World Championship in Las Vegas and online at playffwc.com. Full-Time Fantasy also has NFL and MLB fantasy rankings, draft rankings, seasonal rankings, draft kits, ADP cheat sheets, expert articles, and more throughout the entire season. You can also jump into forums. You can find leagues to jump into, teammates to join your crew, mock drafts, much, much more. Bookmark it. Check it out at fulltimefantasy.com. All right, welcome to the Purple Rain Fantasy Show. Today I'm joined by Charles Kastner, and you can find him on Twitter at KastnerCharles, and also online at purplerainshow.com, where he'll give you some articles on Ravens breakdown and many more topics. So Charles, what's up, man? How we doing today?
Yeah, doing all right.
Glad to have you. Glad you can jump on with me here, and we can get into some football talk. I know we've been planning some stuff, trying to get together for a while, make it work on a weekend. So how you been? How's the off season's getting to be pretty long? I need some football, man. I need it in a bad way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We're at that point. I mean, training camp starts, I think it's 17th is when the rookies report, so we're almost through.
Yeah, it's getting closer, man. I'm ready. I'm itching to go up to a camp because I'm in Wisconsin, so I normally hit up Packer camp every year, and it's a blast, man. I love it. Have you done any Ravens camps?
No, I haven't actually. I have actually been to a game. It was a playoff game against the Chargers.
Yeah,
pretty cool. I'm part-time Maryland National Guard. I was actually one of the guys holding the flag there, so that was pretty neat.
Awesome.
Didn't give us any good seats, but it was decent.
That's badass, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
And of course, thank you for your service.
I got to see one win earlier.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah, the Owings Mills. I got to get out there sometime and either get like a week vacation and go down and visit my family and stuff and go hit the camp up with my brother or meet up some people, But I'm going to get down there. It's my goal. Hopefully maybe next year I'm going to try to do it. Definitely the year after, but I really got to get to a Ravens training camp. I heard a lot of good things about it. And if you're ever up here in Wisconsin, let me know, man. We'll go to a Packers one, and that's a blast up there too. It's pretty unique, so.
Yeah, I mean, training camp, I'm satisfied just to read the takes coming out.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see if any of the hyped up players actually do well in the regular season. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's hard this time with camp, and I think with like Twitter, social media. I mean, reporters and fans are putting 2-second video highlights of player A catching the ball, and it's like the next big thing where the guy is, off the charts. It's crazy. I mean, you can really relate it to the stock market, I guess, to say, we all talk about fantasy football, ADP and stocks rising and player stocks, and it's insane. One highlight makes the guys shoots up the charts, and it's like, this is your hottest fantasy player, and then a month later you forget about him, and then, or he drops a pass.
That's pretty common, actually. That's pretty
crazy.
common. You even see that with teams. Honestly, people read too much into certain storylines.
Yeah,
like they're sort of looking for something. They'll give them an edge, and they look too hard and almost outsmart themselves.
Yeah, it's
By,
crazy. It's crazy.
changing.
Oh, yeah. Well, today's episode for Purple Rain Fantasy Show, we're going to talk some real-life NFL football. We're not going to talk fantasy football per se, but we're going to get on a topic near and dear to most everyone's hearts now, and that's the subject of analytics. And analytics, I'm going to be honest with you, I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not hardcore into it. I don't know the inner workings, to certain extents. And honestly, the analytics to a fan base, to me, seems like it's pretty split as far as I think everybody's generally into it. I think the older guys are more, you don't need analytics, you need an eye test and what your gut tells you. And for me personally, I like a little blend of both. So I want, for me, when I'm looking at stuff, I'm not the expert, obviously. I'll be the first one to admit it. But when I'm looking at stuff, I'm using the eye test, what my gut's saying, what some of the analytics and stats say. But so what I did today is I decided to bring in our resident expert, fellow Purple Rain Show crew man, Mr. Charles Kastner today. So now you can give us some info on some good analytics breakdown, and let's learn, a little more. Let's get the rundown on what it is, how it works, what to expect when NFL teams implement it into their scouting departments. I think by now most every team is, and I think it's always been there, through the years, but to certain leveling degrees. Now it's with the technology, it's insane. But yeah, I mean, it has an effect on the fantasy landscape, but let's get into the real world effects, how it affects the NFL landscape, and also how it's changed. So before we get into like the nuts and bolts, let's start at the beginning. So Charles, like, where does it start? Like, give me the rundown on its origins, development, kind of stuff like that.
All right. So first, I think it's worth explaining what analytics is. And the definition is really, to me, it's as simple as using data to help make decisions. And this seems like it'd be really obvious and common, but it's almost completely left out of most teams' decision-making process when it comes to actual football decisions like roster building or game strategy. So how it basically started was, it really began to emerge in earnest around mid-2000s, about 2006.
Yeah.
One of the earliest notable research was done by an economics professor named David Romer from the University of California. And he wrote a paper on how coaches aren't correctly balancing risk on fourth down. And he started using a concept I'll explain later called expected points. And he basically found out that you maximize your net point expectancy by going for it a lot more, and teams were just completely ignoring it and relying on gut feeling. Also, during 2006, a retired Navy fighter pilot named Brian Burke started posting on his advancedfootballanalytics.com blog, where he researched and posted about a whole bunch of strategic topics, be it like fourth downs, overtime strategies, run-pass balance on each down, in-game kind of strategies like how aggressive or conservative you should be, like whatever. But anything that came to game time strategic decisions, or even some degree roster building, he would have something to say on. And it was that blog, written, by the way, by a fellow Towson High School graduate. So I thought it was pretty cool. I read quickly about the author and realized he went to my high school.
Sweet.
I'm just reading that blog. Yeah. And he's hired by ESPN now, by the way. Someone noticed how good he was. But yeah, reading that blog got me into this topic. And well, I don't claim to be a huge expert myself. I haven't written any super important research. I follow the guys who do, and that's why I came on the show to sort of explain analytics.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know you're into it more than anybody, and you're right. Like, I guess it makes sense too. I mean, around early 2000s too, the coaching landscape of the NFL. I mean, it's just ingrained. It's not, to a degree, it's coaching scared, but these are all older coaches. They've been in the NFL for a long time, and it's like you get burned once on going for it. It doesn't work. And it's almost like superstitional, baseball stuff that, well, we don't go for it anymore, and now it's.
Well, what I think it mainly is actually is that when offenses weren't as good, it was totally worth it to kick and not go for it because field position mattered more,
right?
And having the ball mattered less. The yards were more expensive back then. Yards are cheaper now.
Right.
So punting and pushing back 40 yards, that's cheap now. It doesn't matter as much. Or back then, a 45-yard punt was pretty good. And I think that hasn't fully been adjusted to. And there's it's been slowly changing. They've slowly moved on it to where now coaches go for it on 4th and 1 more than half the time. But it still isn't where it should be, where teams go for it on 4th and 1 probably in 90-95% of situations.
Now, you think that's a little bit of play, how you were saying it's the yards are easier to come by now, especially chunk yardage. You think I look at that, and to me, that tells me the defense is too, you know what I mean? The defense is reined in so much rules-wise that, the older days, they're getting beat up on the line, jamming them, and now you pretty much can only run with the receiver. As a DB, you can only run with the receiver. I mean, even hand placement without any kind of, pushing or anything gets flagged. The receivers have much more freedom than they ever have. So yeah, you're right. I mean, that's what I hear when you say that. For it's the risk is worth it.
To go off on a rules tangent. Yeah, I want to go off on a rules tangent. I think that because of these current rules that you were talking about, analytics does have sort of an opportunity to almost break the game, like people have been complaining about with basketball.
Yeah.
And that right now, since coaches are still punting a lot and still not passing enough on first and second down, which I'll talk about later, there's the game isn't totally broken in favor of the offense. But once teams kind of fully realize what they should be doing, then we're going to see offenses getting even better and better. And then we'll fully be able to see why these rules break the game. Because now I am of the belief that offenses are holding themselves back just a little. And once they start playing optimally, then the game's going to really look broken. Like people have noticed with basketball, how these mid-range jumpers are dead.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. So for like the average guy, I know you kind of started off with it, but for the average guy, what does it all mean? Kind of in a nutshell, the average guy that is, not too familiar with any of it.
Yeah, well, like I said, it basically just means you use data to make your decisions. And right now, it's almost entirely based off of sort of experience and intuition. And experience and intuition, I'm not saying it is valuable. It's completely valuable. However, data provides sort of an objective frame of reference from where you can start that decision making. Like right now, I think maybe not now, but 3 years ago, I think your average coach or coordinator might not have had a clue that going for it on 4th and 1 was the right call by far, even in your own territory. So when they start making their decisions, they don't have that frame of reference. Or if they knew that for the average team versus the average team, going for it on 4th and 1 was always the right call, then they could be like, all right, are there enough mitigating circumstances where we should punt? Or if not, we'll just take the default option, which is go for it. Like right now, their frame of reference is the default option is punt. So their intuition is starting from the wrong place.
Right.
So yeah, that's what analytics is. It's using data to create an objective frame of reference, then going from there with your own intuition.
Now I know for the most part, people hear analytics, and the following word that'll come out of their mouth is Moneyball. So what would an analytics team try to do for an organization? Like, how is it similar or different to the Moneyball concept in baseball?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll quickly run down what Moneyball really was in baseball. This will just take a couple minutes, and it's basically that the Oakland A's were a poor team, so they started cheaping out on some parts of players, like their speed and their fielding and their throwing, and then paying for what was undervalued, which was, just on-base percentage wasn't quite valued as valued as it should be.
Right.
In football, there's no such undervalued player, or if there is, it's tougher to find because of all the player interactions in each individual play. So as such, analytics in football wouldn't be as much about finding the undervalued player. It would be about finding the strategies that could help you win that weren't really used. And that was sort of done a bit in Moneyball. They stopped sacrificing outs as much. They stopped making outs on the base paths, but it was mainly just finding the cheap players, as in, fat guys who got on base, where in football, it's not about finding the undervalued players as much, because that's a lot harder to do. It's more about finding the better strategies.
Right. Yeah. There's so many more pieces for football to come together, than a straight up mano-a-mano baseball, one guy, one up kind of thing.
Yeah. You find that mano-a-mano though with the one team versus one team. And that's where some people might confuse, say, oh, analytics doesn't work at all because of the interaction. Well, you just can't isolate an individual player. You can isolate team versus team just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot more moving pieces, but then overall too, there's so many different factors. So where would a team even start strategy wise? Kind of like, I guess like laying out a game plan.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned this earlier, but when you start strategy wise for research, you need a way to sort of define your situation. And that way is the expected points term I mentioned. And expected points is basically the average of all next scores in similar situations queried from a database of football plays. So it'd say the situation is, you've got a first and 10, your own 25. You can look at a whole bunch of other first and 10s, your own 25, and figure out what all the average next scores were. And the result is the team that's gotten the ball on average scores next by about a point. So the expected point value of that situation is plus 1 point to you. And that is really how all research was done. Like I talked about the, fourth downs, how you should be going for it almost all the time on 4th and 1, and you should get really aggressive towards no man's land. Well, they found that out by using the concept of expected points. You use your expected points if you convert the first down, the first and 10, wherever the line is. The expected points if you fail the first down, the opponent's first and 10 at where you failed. And then the expected points if you get an average punt. And then you multiply in the success rate on the 4th down, and you get the value of going for it versus the value of punting. And it's pretty clear to have this expected points because it's the only way you can really define how good or bad something is. You know how, because you win games by scoring points, so you need to define how well good or bad something is by how many points it's expected to net you relative to what your opponent scores. And that's mainly how you'd start building strategies. What strategies maximize your expected points?
Yeah, and then the NFL stat-wise is like a Smithsonian of history. I mean, you can go back as far as you want to situational things or just anything. I mean, even though the game's evolved, but just in general, the overall information at your fingertips is insane, especially coaching-wise, team-wise.
Yeah, you really only need probably like 5-10 years of data if you're going to build your own sort of expected points model for your own team, which is what I would expect teams to do, because not all teams are the same. Not all teams are average.
How about we just do a Madden simulation?
Yeah, funnily enough, I don't even play Madden, so I don't even know how Madden works with their plays.
Man, I took like 5 years off of Madden because I was so pissed at that damn game way back when. I was like, I'm not playing this shit anymore. And then I bought like NCAA football. I got into that so damn hardcore, just recruitment. It was so fun. They pulled that. I went back to Madden, but now like when you watch ESPN or whatever, they're always doing the Madden simulations. It's like, well, we've simulated 5,000 Madden matchups with the Chiefs and Rams. And they get
I don't know how good the Madden simulation is. I'm sure you could make great. Okay simulations. I have no idea how you do it.
Yeah.
But no, going off on a Madden tangent, I'm sure you know how I spent forever since I played Madden, but I'm sure you know how players online, they go for a whole bunch of 4th downs.
Yeah.
They don't do it just because it's fun. They do it because they've made that decision hundreds of times.
Right.
And realize they win more by going for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, now obviously real football offenses aren't the same as Madden offenses, but the whole point is they sort of analyzed these strategies and came up with something aggressive.
That's right. So going back to it, getting back on topic, the tie into Vegas. So I mean, you got Vegas odds makers, you've got, they're using data to create stuff. So give me a tie in there. Like, how is that coming, related overall?
Well, Vegas is not behind the times on analytics because they need to get these lines accurate. And they've got people checking their work. They've got a whole bunch of bettors checking their work. Like if the Vegas odds makers get it wrong and make inaccurate lines, somebody can use analytics and start making a fortune by out predicting them. So you can bet they are using analytics to make sure that nobody can start robbing them blind. Because how Vegas lines work, if you don't know, is they try to get the same number of people on each side. So, and there are plenty of rich people that can look for a good model that someone has made online, and they can bet a whole bunch of money on the side that if the model says one side is favored much more in the Vegas line. So yeah, in Vegas, they use a lot of models, they use a lot of expert opinions, and overall you get something that's about as accurate as any model out there. So for the Vegas lines, there's less to tie in because they do use analytics. They get it about as accurate as it can be. In fact, a misconception I sort of want to address is that Vegas lines are all influenced by hype. It's just whoever's betting more is going to shift the line that way. It is true that whoever's betting more does shift the line that direction, but keep in mind that these are people putting their money where their mouth is. They're not just people voting in some random online poll. So I think these people, they're generally better informed than your average person making opinions online, and Therefore, I think the Vegas lines are the most accurate way out there to predict a game if you were looking for one.
Yeah, absolutely. I always look at like the early lines before, like you said, that public money comes in and sways them. But like when they start out at like a 2 or 3, and then throughout the week they could end up at a 7 or however it plays out. I always think those early lines, for me, I'm always looking at those the closest, and as far as accuracy, because like you said, they're the ones that they just released that line, and then the movement comes into play throughout the week. So I always I go off of those, when I'm picking games, stuff like that. So I always kind of start early.
The early Vegas lines are probably most of the time it probably doesn't change all that much between the early and later Vegas lines. And when it does, it probably does mean the odds makers might have missed something pretty key.
Yeah.
I think an example I remember when I was too young to ever gamble, unfortunately, was when the Panthers heading into the 2013 season had an over-under of 7.5. They were expected to be a losing team. And the previous season, they were 7-9, but they had a record of, I think, 1-8 in close games. Something ridiculous. Games decided by 7 points or less. It was something ridiculous. They were losing all their close games, and I don't know how the odds makers missed that, but I know a lot of people started betting over on the Panthers that time, and I'm sure if I had to place a bet, I would have had to place something like, minus 170, or maybe not that high, but something crazy. So there are some examples of the clients just get it wrong, and some analytic savvy people are able to check their work and make some money, but it's not common, because if they got it wrong a lot, they lose money.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall when somebody screws that up. That would be interesting.
The more recent one, by the way, was over under for the Chiefs Rams game.
Oh yeah,
Vegas noise there. I think that even was just people getting really hyped about a high scoring game just turning out to be correct.
Yeah, that was one of the best games last year for sure. Hopefully they can repeat that this year with one. I think do the Packers play the Chiefs? I think they were hyping that. I heard. Was it this year? I can't think of the schedule right now, but
I'm going to try to think. It's this will be 2019 season, so it's the same matchups as 2015. I can't remember who played who in 2015. I know we play the West. And I don't. Yeah, I'd have to Google it. All I know is we play the West, and Packers don't play the East. They don't play the North. So they play either the Chiefs or the South. I can't remember when they lost to the South.
Yeah, something like that.
They just play the Chiefs. So they play the South in 2012, remember? So, yeah, Packers do play the Chiefs.
Yeah, that could have some potential shootout material in that. We'll have to see how that develops. So
I also know this once and all. Packers playing it, Google it real fast. Yeah, they play the Chiefs.
Is it? Yeah,
right.
I thought it was. I just couldn't remember. They got to kick that on a primetime game or something. Hopefully it's a Sunday nighter.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the Packers' offense has kind of stuttered in recent years. I guess if you don't mind me going off another tangent, a reason the Packers' offense has kind of been a little bit overestimated recently is the reliance on the passer rating stat when better stats are available. Because Aaron Rodgers, I guess how I like to put this is he plays almost like he's trying to maximize his passer rating, not maximize the team's points.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then he just takes a whole bunch of sacks, does anything to sort of avoid the turnover, which almost to a fault. And then he also gets his number called a lot in the red zone. They don't run the ball as much in the red zone. Kind of the opposite of Matt Ryan in the past 3 years, where they like to hand it off to Devonta Freeman. So that sort of creates the economy where Aaron Rodgers is putting up similar pass ratings overall to Matt Ryan over the past several years. So the Falcons have been scoring more points a game, more yards, because Rodgers has been taking sacks, but still getting a lot of touchdowns, and mainly just playing like he's trying to maximize his passer rating. Yeah, we'll see how that's the shootout or not.
He's always admitted that too. I mean, it's pretty clear that he'd rather take a sack than throw the pick, and whether it's just his own kind of thing that he doesn't want the stat line of interceptions when his career is over, maybe that's it. And like you said, in the red zone, he'll call his own number because I think it's a trust factor. And I think you're either a quarterback that's a system guy, like you could say Peyton Manning, where he trusts the system more than he does himself to an extent. And Rodgers is kind of the opposite, where he's just going to do it on his own and say, screw it and run in. I don't care. Kind of like this past season when he's making his own plays in the huddle. So like this year,
Oh yeah, the McCarthy.
yeah, it's like, I mean, I think he's more of a, well, screw it, I'll win the game myself mentality. And I think like Favre would have been a blend of that, where he'd do maybe 50-50. He'd still throw the boneheaded picks, but it was kind of like a split where he'd stay in it and ride it out so long and then say, all right, screw it, I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Rodgers just seems like he rolls out and I'm going to do it myself from quarter 1 to quarter 4. I don't know.
And to be clear, this has worked before. I think is from 2009 through 2014, he was probably the best quarterback in football. Maybe Payton was better during that time. I don't know. It was close. Rodgers was very good, but that was because he had a high regular yards per attempt and avoided picks and threw touchdowns, so the sacks were all right. But since about 2015 to present, the yards per attempt has dropped and the sacks have stayed. And now he's just a guy that gets his number called in the red zone and doesn't throw picks, while being kind of like average to subpar, moving the ball downfield and while getting injured. And then you throw all that together, you get a Packers offense that's no longer dominating the division and kind of struggling a little.
Yeah.
And I guess to tie that into analytics as a concept, analytics, a big part of it is the idea that you can search for better stats than the ones currently used. Like most people are looking, passer rating and touchdown to interception ratio, but those stats don't really reflect as well how well a team is moving the ball. And certain adjustments of yards per attempts that give weight to touchdowns and picks, but less than passer rating does, are a little more indicative of how well an offense is performing overall.
Totally. So what other strategic applications specifically does it have?
Yeah, well, I already got into fourth down decision making. I'd say the other strategic application is figuring out run pass balance at different downs. Like on first and second down, teams are running the ball much more than they should because I don't know, that's just how it's always been, I guess. But right now, passing just gains so many more yards, so many more expected points, is much more likely to get the first down. So teams should be passing a whole lot more on first and second down. Whereas on third and medium and third and short, teams are actually passing too often. Like, I don't know, like, it's gotten to the idea that you always got to pass on third down, even third and 3. You see teams pass like 60-70% of the time. So I think one example of two-point conversions where you don't even really need to apply analytics. It's just sort of basic strategy that teams aren't even thinking about, that isn't crossing their minds, is when they're down 10, 14, or 15 points in the fourth quarter. And to do this, you just need to calculate a couple positions ahead, like you're playing chess almost, and coaches haven't even really thought to do that. The main example of this is when you're down 14 points in the middle of the fourth quarter, it seems really intuitive and obvious that, you just kick the extra point twice, and that going for two would be just like going for 2 when you score when down 7. But that's actually not the case, because if you're down 14, if you succeed the first 2-point conversion, you can just kick the extra point next time, and that's 15 points. You'd win, assuming you score 2 touchdowns. Or if you fail the first 2-point conversion, you can actually go for it again to make up the ground you lost. So instead of comparing the odds of making it once to missing it once, you need to compare the odds of making it once versus missing it 2 times in a row. Like, that's why you go for it the first time, not the second time. Because if you go for it the second time, fail, just over. Go for it the first time and fail, you can make up the ground. And the way the math works on it, it's really just like 7th grade level algebra, is if you have about a 39% chance of succeeding a 2-point conversion, you should go for 2 if you score a touchdown down 14. And most people think, you need a 50% chance, but it ends up being around the 39% chance that you need.
True. Very good point.
Yeah. And when you're down 15 points in the fourth quarter, this one drives me on the wall even more, even though it's only the tiniest of edges. It just seems so stupid. Teams kick the extra point on the first touchdown. It's like they're just sticking their heads in the sand and saying, no, I don't want to know if I'll make it. I'll wait and attempt it later. Like, you've got to go for 2 at some point. When you much rather fail it now and know, oh crap, I failed, I'm down 2 scores, I need to onside kick, than fail a 2-point conversion later when there's nothing you can do. Like, would you rather be down 9 points with 6 minutes left, or be down 1 point, or rather 2 points with 6 seconds left? Which is better? You got to go for it at some point. You just got to calculate 2 positions ahead, realize I got to go for it now or later. If I go for it now and fail, I can still maybe get the miracle onside kick. Or if I go for it and the second touchdown fails, there's nothing I can do. I just lose. So
sure.
it seems so obvious to me that you got to go for it the first time. But teams think, oh no, kick keep it a one-score game without realizing that you don't know if it's not a one-score game if you're going to fail, and you might as well fail now and fail later. And
For sure. A little bit of chess match, a little bit of clock management.
Yeah.
You don't want to be up against the clock either.
Yeah. And then the final one that's in the same scenario, well, the same theme as the 15.1 with the whole, knowledge is power deal, is if you're down 10. Because if you're down 10, you don't know if a 7-point touchdown and a field goal wins. That forces overtime. You don't know if that's a win or a loss. Or if you score a touchdown and you go for 2, then you know if a field goal wins. It's like knowing how overtime will turn out ahead of time, because you know if a field goal will win you the game or lose. So if you score a touchdown down 10, you go for 2, and then you fail, okay, a field goal isn't going to work. I need a touchdown. Where if you succeed, a field goal is going to work. You can kick it and win. Or if you just go for the 1-point conversion, then you kick a field goal to go to overtime. You don't know if you're going to win or lose. So again, that's just if your offense is terrible, you probably shouldn't go for 2 there. But if it's almost 50%, you definitely should, because the whole, knowledge is power. I know how overtime will turn out ahead of time. Therefore, I can plan whether I need to field goal or not.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah, that was just a take I was mentioning. I don't know if it needs to be recorded. I just think it's really interesting that teams are not even like thinking 2 possessions ahead when they're going for 2. They're like, oh, we have to keep it a 1-score game, and not realizing that, I don't know if it's a 1-score game or not, because I don't know if I'm going to make the 2-pointer. Let's find out now.
Yeah. I think it's like almost playing scared, but maybe not scared, but just to keep it within reach instead of taking the stand to go aggressive in that moment. Because in the moment you're like, well, shit, I don't want to lose the game. Let's keep it within 1 score. We're close. We're hanging. We'll do some things and then we'll take it, instead of just going, we're taking this right now.
That's exactly how that Brian Burke guy put it. He said coaches often coach to stay in the game as long as possible, as opposed to coach to maximize your probability of winning. Because in reality, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to lose the game. If I'd rather have a 40% chance to lose the game right away than be in a 50-50 state. You know what I mean? Like, say hypothetically you had, I don't know, a 2-point conversion with no time on the clock, but the opponent had just committed a penalty. So it was at the opponent's 1.25 yard line. You'll have to distance the goal. Then obviously you're better off going for it, right? Because you've got, maybe like a greater than 50% chance to win right now. So obviously you'd rather possibly lose now, but have a better than 50% chance than have the 50-50 chance to lose later. So yeah, that's what it is. They're kicking it to stay in the game as long as possible, even though they maximize their probability of winning by risking the chance to lose now against the chance to win now.
So what direction do you think our Ravens can go for further research?
The Ravens are an interesting example because, while generally passing is better, the Ravens are one of the few teams that's both run-oriented and extremely good at it. Most teams that are run-oriented have had offenses that have sputtered, but the Ravens were such a fantastic rushing team with Lamar Jackson that it worked very well for them. So I think the direction that they'll go is trying to figure out, okay, how much better was our run game really? What kind of run pass balance should we get? Should we keep it about where it was, or should we start passing more like we saw in the end of the Chargers game where they started passing every play and still scoring a ton? That was a weird game. We couldn't run all game, and then we passed it away and it started working. So they'll definitely try to figure out exactly how far they can push this almost Army Navy style offense they got going on. And I think what they'll also be working on is breaking down the play selection further. Before I just talked about the whole run-pass dichotomy. Now they can start talking about what specific plays work well. Because, the nerd doing the research, he doesn't know what play was called. He just knows run-pass. The Ravens can push to the guys they hired, listen, we called this play, this was the result. We called this play, this was the result. They can start recording it and figure out which play scores, gets more yards or gets more expected points against which personnel grouping of the opponent defense in which situation. You could really break it down to the nitty-gritty. So there are a whole lot of directions the Ravens could do to get every minute edge if they're willing to put the investment in their analytics team, and if they're willing to really, really break it down and trust what they say.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing with Greg Roman too now, because he's a hell of a lot more innovative than Marty Ball. So I think there's more possibilities for some, he's always key in changing lineups and putting different positional players in different spots for the run game. They brought in the option guru this, mini camp. So that's, I think it a good ceiling on what they could do this year overall on offense for something different and just keep defenses on their toes,
I don't think, I think they started doing a lot of that last season because I know they did go for it on fourth down more than other teams did. I was really proud of the time of the Chiefs game, for example, when they failed the first one on fourth and short. They didn't get cold feet, and they went for it twice more and succeeded both. It might have only been once, I forget.
Yeah.
But I mean, that showed determination. Most teams would have been like, "Oh no, that didn't work. We'll just stop doing it." And the Ravens said, "It didn't work this time. Try it again," and then it did.
Yeah,
so
I don't. That's a good thing because they can't coach scared. They got to be willing to take some shots.
Yeah, they got to be willing, and they got to recognize that it's, going for it on fourth down. These analytical strategies, they're not like magic bullets that will always make you win. It's just a slight edge over the course of a whole season. If you're more aggressive, you'll do a little better each time, and you help your team just a little bit each time. Even like going for it might be worth only, I don't know, like 1/20th of an expected point over punting, but you do it a bunch of times, it might add up.
Yeah, no, we've been talking on analytics overall as a team, but how does analytics help, with like a player evaluation for teams?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it is pretty limited. However, the website, which I'm sure you've heard of, called ProFootballFocus.com,
yep.
We're really trying to chart everything, chart all the exact details of these plays so that maybe it can be used for a little bit of player evaluation, get a little more accurate there. And even layman analytics, something just your random nerd online could do, isn't totally useless for player evaluation. You could notice some larger trends to give that objective frame of reference. For example, I think any stat head online could have told you that Christian Hackenberg wasn't worth drafting simply because his college numbers were so bad. You shouldn't even consider him. He was a guy that was one of the bottom 10, 20 passers, and every single year he was in college, you can just immediately not waste time scouting, just immediately throw him off. And I think, you can get really rough estimates of player ability. Like if you look at a guy that put up fantastic stats in college, you can just push him to your scouts and be like, all right, scout this guy. I'm not guaranteeing you he's good, but his numbers are at least worth looking into. And you could also look at a guy who is like Christian Hackenberg and be like, all right, he's not worth your time. His numbers are so bad that it's not even worth looking at. And I think there's probably been one significant example already of an analytics team sort of pushing a player up higher up board than he'd been pushed by most people, and that was when the guys on the Browns decided to go with Baker Mayfield as their quarterback. Because if anyone that's really followed these analytics nerds knows that they'd been pushing Baker Mayfield QB1 for pretty much the entire offseason. I mean, Pro Football Focus never had him as not the number one player on the board because he was just so amazing in college that I know you can't project his performance 100% to the NFL, but he was just so amazing for so long that he was a really safe bet. And sure enough, he looked good. Well, most former players and scouts were going a little too heavy on the traits and saying, he's not quite as physically gifted as Sam Darnold or Josh Allen, so he's QB2, QB3. So again, that's not always going to work. You've had guys like Tim Tebow who were fantastic in college, Matt Leinart, and he never turned out to be anything. But I think there's still a place for guys that put up good numbers in college should at least be scouted a little more heavily, especially if you get an advanced analytics team, start adjusting for things like strength of schedule, like, how many teammates are projected to get drafted high, a whole bunch of other things. So it has a place for player evaluation, but it's less accurate because you're always going to have those exceptions like Matt Leinart, Geno Smith, Tim Tebow that look like they're going to be good players analytically, but outside the reservations and turn out to be correct.
Yeah, it's a good baseline. And then going back to the Baker Mayfield, just for stats, they had Baker Mayfield at with the QB career passer rating 175.4. And then Lamar Jackson fell in there. I think it was like between 146 and 149 sophomore and junior seasons. You're
going to Jackson. Sorry to cut you off. I probably should have mentioned Jackson first, but the Football Outsiders website that has the probably the best stats-based quarterback projection system out there actually did have Lamar Jackson as QB2 for his draft class. They had Mayfield at 1, Jackson at 2, and I think it was Darnold 3, Rosen 4, which seems to be how it's playing out so far.
Yeah,
so,
it's crazy that it's like you're right. The numbers don't lie. That baseline, there is some definite foundation to it, and for sure.
Yeah, they had their misses too, though. For example, they had Mariota as almost as highly rated as Mayfield, and Mariota's been pretty marginal player so far. He's like Tannehill 2.0, not in style of play, but in terms of effectiveness, he's Tannehill 2.0. And funnily enough, I think Tannehill is his backup now. So
yeah.
I got to the same guy almost.
Yeah, the quarterback's got to be the toughest position. I mean, there's so many things to factor in there, and there's always misses, and some of the sure things are misses. Some of the misses are turn out to be sure things. you just can't see, sometimes it just comes out of left field with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then any kind of misconceptions to clear up on analytics? What do you think there? Any takes? Because I always hear, back and forth, but any misconceptions that you're like, this is not true, or things like that are just way off base?
There's one huge misconception that is always brought up as an argument to anything analytics, and that is that these stats, this research needs to be 100% accurate and account for all variables. And if you can think for a couple variables that aren't accounted for, it's all worthless. You just throw it out. Oh, it doesn't count for this. Worthless. Throw it out. And it's really just about getting a good estimate. You pay your coaches and scouts to do something after all, right? You're going to pay them to take that starting point and come up with your final evaluation. Analytics just give you the baseline. However, that doesn't mean they're not accurate at all, and coaches and scouts can just completely do their own thing and ignore analytics baselines, because that's how you get decisions like drafting Hackenberg in the second round, or passing on Russell Wilson until the third round when he had set the NCAA record pass rating. That's what happens when you throw out numbers completely. So you clearly need to use them as a baseline, and they're clearly useful even if they're just estimates. So yeah, that's the misconception that they need to be 100% accurate. They got to count for everything and not throw it out. And in fact, one that drives me up the wall the most is if someone I know posts a quarterback stat that has the results that people don't think is great. Like there's a stat that says, oh, Matt Ryan's been playing better than Aaron Rodgers for a few years. They'll say, oh no, there are too many variables. That it doesn't account for blah, 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 blah. You have to watch them play. I guarantee you the person that said that was not charting every play meticulously. He was not a pro scout. No, I guarantee you he looked at his passer rating and touchdown to interception ratio and the basis of paying off that, and then criticized the better stat for having too many unaccounted for variables. So that's what drives me up the wall. You say all the stats aren't perfect, and then you use the worst stat because it's all you use.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally, we'll wrap it up on this last question. You ready? The future of analytics. How is it going to change or evolve? Because I'm telling you, man, I mean, I've been watching football since I've been a kid, and you hear, old guys say, it ain't the same game from when I was a kid. And I don't look at it in a bad way, but to see it evolve, I think is pretty damn cool. And all you have to do is turn on a highlight of something from the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, from gear to the plays to everything, quarterback play development, all of it. So with analytics, how does that change? How's that going to evolve, you think, over the future course of time here?
And well, first of all, I totally feel you on watching the old highlights, how the game's evolved. I mean, I just found, because I didn't become a fan until relatively late, 2006. And I looked up a highlight of, looked up the game of Ravens-Titans in 2000s, that defensive slugfest. And it was amazing to see how different everything was back then. And heck, even the final Ravens-Titans rivalry game, the one in 08 where we beat them again, even looking at that, we were like, wow, this is really a different game. But with regards to how analytics is going to change, there's so much room to grow because of how teams haven't really adopted it too much. When they do adopt it, there's going to be so much more data to use. Like right now, there just doesn't exist data as to what exact play was called. I don't know, for example, if the play was Spider to Y Banana or something like that. I don't know how effective it is. I don't know how, because there's no data for what play was called. Analytics will evolve when teams adopt it and start building databases where they keep track of, okay, this is the play that was called, this is the personnel grouping the opposing defense had. And then when they have all that, they can build really good, they can get really good research done as far as which play should be called in which situations.
Yeah, I'd like to think that like every team, they've got to have an analytics department where, like you said, they're charting every play, and then they can go back and look at the data and go, okay, shotgun 5 wide set. When this is called, here's a percent, here's, and so on. But then you kind of throw a monkey wrench into that when the coaching changes, because do they want to go back and look at, if you've got a consistent coach, say Tomlin, any of the longer tenured coaches, I think they've got the best chances, wouldn't you, of to go back and look into what they've called plays through the years. When the next guy comes in, he's been there 2-3 years. It's a smaller sample size, but then again, it's like, well, how far does he want to go back from the old coaching staff to look at what they did? I mean, you can get an overview, but for specific game plan, play calling, stuff like that, I think that's pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, this is going to be a huge challenge actually, because you don't know how much weight you should assign to plays run by your specific team against the opposing team in history, is probably the league as a whole, because you need to get a large sample size. You want to give some weight to just the general league average baselines, but you also want to tailor it somewhat to your team. You know what I mean? Like, you can't build an expected points model based entirely off games by your team in this one season. That doesn't work.
Right.
So you're going to have to do some of the model, based partially off plays by your team in the season, partially by plays by your team in past seasons, partially by the league average. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, I'm not smart enough to know how to do that, but I hope the people that Ravens hired are. So we'll see if they're that good at that. And yeah, going back to what I was saying, there are a whole bunch of other questions that can't really be answered right now that will be answered in the future. Like, one I've always wondered is how many deep passes are defended with 2 deep safeties as opposed to single high. Because I sort of felt when watching a team like lose to the Patriots that they just get eaten up by those short passes, whether they can even afford to run 2 deep safeties. And I don't know if two deep safeties are stopping the Patriots from completing deep passes, because I don't know the results against certain defenses. And if you have a better analytics department, you can sort of record that data and figure out, all right, their yards per attempt on deep passes is this high when we have 2 deep safeties. It's this high against single high safety. Is it worth it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's like the possibilities are endless. It really is.
Yeah, and I guess there's one other thing. I think it's almost a bit of a meme in the analytics Twitter people I follow. It's the idea that running backs don't matter. I'm sure you've heard that phrase. You may have heard that phrase from someone on Twitter saying, "Oh, we don't need running backs. They're totally replaceable." And that is, I like to address it just so it's a bit of a hyperbole. However, for the most part, I think it's true, in that you can generally, you've heard the 80-20 rule reference, try to get 80% of the production for 20% of the cost.
Right.
It's a lot easier to do that with running backs because of multiple reasons. First of all is that the running game has a weaker relationship with winning than the passing game. Like, in general, the consistent winners are the ones with good quarterbacks that keep passing well. I'm sure nobody would debate that. They've seen it with their own eyes with how well the Patriots, the Steelers, the Packers, whoever had Peyton Manning has played well. So clearly the pass game is more important. Second of all, this is something people don't know as much, but even the most important part of the run game is the ability to consistently get 4, 5, 6 yards, not the occasional breakaway. And that 4, 5, 6 yard part is more dependent on the O-line than the running back. So even when the run game is mattering, like in that 4th down is short, that's a huge high leverage play. It's the O-line that gets a party, not the running back. And then third of all, it's that running backs, they have shorter shelf lives. They get injured. So even if, say, I'm not saying a center is more important to the game than a running back, but at least if you have a Pro Bowl center now, you'd probably be pretty good 5 years from now. Whereas the running back, it really goes back and forth. I mean, you look at Todd Gurley going from Rookie of the Year to horrible when the Rams offense as a whole is horrible. They're really good for the past couple seasons. And then you see C.J. Anderson replicating that production. Overall, it was the team that mattered, and then the running back was sort of a reflection of how well the team was doing. So I think I couldn't do an analyst podcast without mentioning that and the main points for why people say running backs don't matter.
For sure.
Even the Ravens are a decent example of it. The Ravens were probably the best rushing team in the NFL last season. So you might think, oh, they're a counterpoint to rushing not mattering. And it's true that they're a bit of a counterpoint to rushing not mattering. However, do you think anyone would really say that Gus Edwards was the reason that they were the best running offense in the NFL in the past couple, past like half season.
Right.
I mean, of course not. They'd say it was, a great system with a great quarterback to run that system, and you just sort of plugged in a competent running back and you excelled with Lamar Jackson helping run the option and then Ronnie Stanley and Marshall Yanda blocking well. Yeah, so that's just sort of closing, that's why I wanted to bring that up. It was just an analytics podcast, and I sort of had to mention probably the most common analytics meme on Twitter that you hear people referencing.
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on, man, and talking analytics. It's good. I see it out there on Twitter quite a bit, but there's not too many people getting into it in depth. And I mean, on Twitter, everybody's an expert. So I figured let's talk some shop and see what we've got. We've got a little time to pass before NFL season's upon us. So that was great to do this, and let's definitely do it again. If you want to follow Charles on Twitter, find him at Kastner, Kastner, Charles. And then also again on purplerainshow.com, all of us are on there, the whole crew, hitting you through the entire season coming up. We got a lot of good stuff in the works, so stay tuned on that. And any analytics stuff, send it both of our way. Charles, I appreciate your time today, and we will definitely catch up here. Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely catch up again through the season and during fantasy football as well. So,
all right, then see you later, I guess.
Yep, thanks for jumping on. I appreciate it.
All right, bye.
See ya.
Yeah, all right, this press conference is over.
Go away.
No, it's over, Phil.
Police
It's over.